The cantina was dark and filled with smoke from a dozen different worlds. Strange music played from hidden speakers, mixing the sounds of alien instruments that no human ear had ever heard. In the corner booth sat Zethkari, a massive creature, with 4 arms and skin like black armor. His red eyes stared into a glass of blue liquid that glowed softly in the dim light. The war was over. 3 years had passed since the peace treaty was signed on neutral ground. The Terran Coalition War had ended with handshakes and promises, but the memories remained. Zethkari knew this better than most. He lifted the glass with one of his 4 hands and took a small sip. The liquid burned going down, but it helped quiet the voices in his head. The voices of the dead, both human and alien. "Is that him?" whispered a young Krelian soldier at the bar. His green skin was still bright, unmarked by battle scars. "Is that the Zethkari who fought at the Battle of Proxima?" "That's him," said another recruit, this one a tall Morvian with silver eyes. "I heard he killed 50 humans in that battle alone." "50?" laughed a third alien, a small creature with too many teeth. "The stories say he killed 100, maybe more." The young soldiers looked at each other and grinned. They had heard the stories about the great Zethkari, the Vorthan warrior who had become famous during the war. But they had also heard other stories, stranger stories. Stories about humans that didn't make sense. "Let's go talk to him," said the Krelian. "I want to hear about the war from someone who was really there." "Are you sure?" asked the Morvian. "He looks like he wants to be left alone." "Come on," said the small alien. "What's the worst that could happen? He tells us to go away." The 3 young soldiers walked across the cantina, their boots making different sounds on the metal floor. Other customers looked up from their drinks, then quickly looked away. Everyone knew who Zethkari was. Everyone knew to leave him alone, but the young soldiers didn't know. Or they didn't care. "Excuse me," said the Krelian, standing next to the booth. "Are you Zethkari? The Zethkari?" The big alien didn't look up from his drink. "I am Zethkari." "What do you want?" "We wanted to meet you," said the Morvian, sliding into the booth without being asked. "We've heard so many stories about you, about the war." "Stories," Zethkari repeated slowly. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "What kind of stories?" The small alien sat down too, grinning with all his teeth. "About how you killed so many humans. About how you were the best warrior in the Vorthan army. About how humans are weak and cowardly." Zethkari's red eyes finally looked up from his drink. They were old eyes, tired eyes. Eyes that had seen too much. "Humans are weak and cowardly?" "That's what everyone says," said the Krelian, joining his friends in the booth. "They say humans only won the war because they got lucky. They say humans are just another soft species that doesn't know how to really fight." The cantina seemed to grow quieter. Other customers turned to listen, though they pretended not to. The strange music still played, but somehow it seemed softer now. Zethkari set down his glass very carefully. His 4 hands moved slowly, deliberately. "Who told you this?" "Everyone knows it," said the Morvian. "Humans are weak. They don't have claws or armor or sharp teeth. They can't even see in the dark properly. How could they be dangerous?" "They're just lucky," agreed the small alien. "They got lucky with their technology. They got lucky with their allies. Real warriors like you could have won the war easily, if the politicians hadn't gotten in the way." Zethkari was quiet for a long moment. He looked at each of the young soldiers in turn. Their faces were eager, excited. They wanted to hear war stories. They wanted to hear about glory and honor and easy victories. They had no idea what they were asking for. "You want to know about humans," Zethkari said finally. His voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow everyone in the cantina could hear him. "You want to know what I learned fighting them?" "Yes," said the Krelian quickly. "Tell us about The battles. Tell us how you defeated them. Zethkari picked up his glass again, but he didn't drink from it. He just held it, watching the blue liquid glow. I will tell you about humans, but first, you need to understand something. The war didn't end because of politics. The war didn't end because humans got lucky. He looked up at the three young faces. The war ended because we learned what humans really are. And once we learned that, we knew we had to make peace. Because the alternative was too terrible to imagine. The small alien laughed. Come on, old warrior. They're just humans, soft, weak, slow humans. What could be so terrible about them? Zethkari's eyes grew distant. He was looking at something the young soldiers couldn't see. Something from the past. Something that still haunted his dreams. You want to know about humans? He asked. His voice was different now. Colder. I'll tell you what I learned fighting alongside them and against them. I'll tell you stories that will make you understand why the bravest warriors in the galaxy wake up screaming in the night. He set down his drink and leaned forward. But don't expect to sleep well tonight. Don't expect to ever think about humans the same way again. Because once you know what they really are, once you understand what they're capable of, you'll realize something that took me 3 years of war to learn. The cantina was completely silent now. Even the music had stopped. What's that? Whispered. The Morvian. Zethkari's red eyes seemed to burn in the darkness. That the most dangerous predator in the galaxy looks just like prey. Zethkari closed his eyes and let the memories come flooding back. When he opened them again, the three young soldiers were still sitting there, waiting. Their faces showed excitement, but also something else now. Maybe a little fear. 3 years ago, Zethkari began. I was a battalion commander in the Vorthan Army. My unit was sent to take a human mining colony called Titan Base. It was built into the side of a mountain on a world called Kepler 9. The humans had been digging there for years, pulling rare metals from the rock. He picked up his glass but didn't drink. The base was small. Maybe 300 humans lived there. Workers, families, children. They had a small security force, but nothing serious. We had 2,000 soldiers. Ships in orbit. Heavy weapons. The humans were trapped. The Krelian leaned forward. So you took it quickly. We should have, Zethkari said. Any normal species would have surrendered in a day, maybe 2. We cut off their communications. We blocked all the escape routes. We had them surrounded completely. No food could get in. No supplies, no help was coming. The cantina was still quiet. Other customers were listening, but they pretended to look at their drinks. On the first day, we sent a message to their commander, a human called Captain Jake Morrison. We told him to surrender. We promised to treat his people well if they gave up without a fight. What did he say? Asked the small alien. Zethkari's red eyes grew darker. He said no, just no, nothing else. So you attacked? We tried. Every time we got close to the base, they would hit us with sniper fire. The humans had taken positions in the rocks around the mountain. We couldn't see them, but they could see. US. They picked off our soldiers one by one. The Morvian laughed. A few snipers? That's nothing. Why didn't you just bomb the whole mountain? We couldn't. We needed the mining equipment intact. The metals they were digging were too valuable to destroy. So we had to take the base without heavy bombing. Zethkari took a sip of his drink. After a week, we thought we were winning. The humans stopped shooting back as much. We thought they were running out of ammunition. We thought they were getting weak. Then what happened? Asked the Krelian. They started talking to us. The 3 young soldiers looked confused. Talking over the radio. They would call our communication channels and just talk. At first, it seemed random. They would tell jokes. They would describe what they had. For dinner, one human woman, Sergeant Lisa Cole, she would tell us about her childhood on Earth. That's strange, said the small alien. Why would they do that? Zeth Curry's hands tightened around his glass. We thought they were going crazy. Humans trapped in a small space with no hope. We thought the stress was breaking their minds. He paused, remembering. Then they started talking about us. About you, about our soldiers, by name. They would call and say things like, "Tell Vexthan his mate on Vorthos Prime is having their first child. He'll never see it," or Chromos. "From the 3rd Battalion, your brother died in the hospital yesterday. The infection from his war wound was too much." The cantina grew even quieter. Several customers had stopped pretending not to listen. "How did they know these things?" whispered the Morvian. "We didn't know. We thought it was just guessing. But they kept doing it. Every day. They would call and tell us personal things about our soldiers. Things that were true. Things that hurt." Zeth Curry finished his drink in one long swallow. "After 2 weeks, some of our soldiers started asking to be transferred. They said the humans were getting inside their heads, making them think about home, making them sad." "That's psychological warfare," said the Krelian. "Clever, but still just tricks." "Yes, just tricks. But then they started playing music." "Music?" "Human. Music. Over the radio. But not just any music. They played funeral songs. Death songs. Songs that humans sing when someone dies. They played them all day and all night. Every day for a week." The small alien shifted in his seat. Why would they do that? Because they were planning something. But we didn't know what. We thought they were just trying to scare us. We thought it was another trick. Zeth Curry raised his hand to call for another drink. "After 3 weeks, I decided to end it. I ordered a full assault on the base, all 2,000 soldiers. We were going to take it by force, no matter what. And we broke through their outer defenses. We fought our way up the mountain. Our soldiers were brave. They charged through the human gunfire. Many died, but we kept going. We reached the base entrance." The server brought Zeth Curry another glass of blue liquid. He waited until the server left before continuing. "We blasted open the doors. We rushed inside, ready for a final battle. We expected to find the humans waiting for us, armed and desperate. But they weren't there. They were there, all of them, but not fighting." Zeth Curry's voice became very quiet. "They were standing in the main hall, 300 humans, men, women, children. All of them just standing there, watching us come in, standing there, in perfect rows, like soldiers at attention. Not moving, not talking, just standing there and watching us." The 3 young aliens looked at each other. This wasn't the story they had expected. In the center of the hall stood Captain Morrison and Sergeant Cole. Morrison was holding a small device in his hand. Cole was smiling. What kind of device? A detonator. The humans had rigged the entire base with explosives, every room, every tunnel, every support beam. They had been planning this for weeks. Zeth Curry's red eyes stared into the distance. Morrison looked at me and said, "Welcome to Titan Base, Commander. We've been waiting for you." Then Cole pressed the button. The 3 young soldiers stared at Zeth Curry with wide eyes. They waited for him to continue, but the old warrior just sat there, looking at his new drink. The blue liquid glowed softly in the dark cantina. "What happened?" asked the Krelian finally. "Did they blow up the base?" Zeth Curry shook his head slowly. "No, that's what we expected. That's what any normal species would do. Blow themselves up and take as many enemies with them as possible. Then what?" Cole looked at Morrison and said, "Not yet, Captain. We still have work to do." Then she looked at me and smiled again. It was the coldest smile I've ever seen. The small alien shifted in his seat. "I don't understand." "Neither did we. Morrison told us that the explosives were real. He said they could bring down the whole mountain if they wanted. But he made us a deal." "What kind of deal?" "He said they would surrender, All of them, no more fighting. But only if we agreed to take them prisoner instead of killing them. He said they had valuable information about human military plans. Zethkari took a sip of his drink. My commanders wanted that information. So we agreed. We took all 300 humans prisoner and put them on our ship, the Bone Render. It was one of our biggest warships. You captured them all? We thought we did. The humans came quietly. No fighting, no tricks. They seemed defeated, broken. We thought we had finally won a clean victory against the humans. The Morvian leaned forward, but something went wrong. Everything went wrong. But not right away. For 3 days, everything seemed normal. We questioned the prisoners. Commander Amy Price, she was Morrison's second in command. She told us about human troop movements. She gave us locations of other bases. She seemed very cooperative. Zethkari's voice grew quieter, too cooperative, but we were happy. We thought we had broken the human spirit. We thought they had finally learned to fear us. What happened on the 4th day? The lights went out. The cantina seemed to grow darker as Zethkari spoke, not all at once. First, the lights in Sector 7 flickered and died. Then Sector 12, then the main corridor. Within an hour, half the ship was in darkness. Technical problems? That's what we thought. Our engineers went to fix the power systems. But every time they fixed one section, another section would fail. It was like the ship was breaking down piece by piece. The small alien frowned. Ships don't just break down like that. No, they don't. But this was just the beginning. On day 5, the artificial gravity started acting strange. In some corridors, you would float to the ceiling. In others, you would be pressed to the floor so hard you couldn't move. Zethkari paused to drink. Then the air recycling systems began to fail. Some rooms became too hot to enter. Others became so cold that frost formed on the walls. And through it all, we could hear sounds. What kind of sounds? Footsteps in empty corridors. Voices in rooms where no one was supposed to be. Laughter coming from the air vents. And music. Music again. Human funeral music. Just like at Titan Base. But this time it came from everywhere. From the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling. No matter where we went, we could hear it. The 3 young soldiers looked at each other nervously. Other customers in the cantina had moved closer to listen. Our security chief checked on the human prisoners every hour. They were all still in their cells, all accounted for. Amy Price would smile and ask if we needed anything else. She seemed completely calm. But someone was sabotaging your ship? Someone. Or something. Our sensors couldn't detect any life signs moving through the ship. But things kept breaking. Important things. The navigation system started showing false readings. The weapons systems would fire randomly. The communication array began sending out human distress signals. Zethkari's red eyes seemed to glow in the dark. On day 6, 3 of our engineers disappeared. Disappeared? Gone. We found their tools in the engine room, but no bodies. No blood. No signs of a struggle. Just empty uniforms lying on the floor. Where did they go? We never found out. But that night, their voices joined the sounds in the walls. We could hear them talking, calling for help. But when we followed the voices, we found nothing. The Morvian's silver eyes were wide. This sounds like a ghost story. It was a ghost story. But the ghosts were real. Zethkari leaned forward. On day 7, I decided to question Amy Price again. I wanted to know what was happening to my ship. What did she tell you? She looked at me with those human eyes and said, "You should have left us on the mountain, Commander. We told you we had work to do." I asked her what she meant. She just smiled and said, "My boys are very good at their jobs. Ben Carter is the best pilot in the human Navy. Tony Martinez can fix anything or break anything, depending on what you need. They don't like being left behind, the small aliens. Teeth were chattering. "But you said you captured all the humans." "We captured all the humans we could see. But humans are clever. When we destroyed their ship in the battle, we tractored aboard the wreckage to search for survivors. What we didn't know was that some of the humans had hidden inside the wreckage. Dead men, we thought. Corpses floating in space. But they weren't dead. They were barely alive, but alive enough." While we were busy capturing the obvious prisoners, Carter and Martinez and 2 others were cutting their way into our ship through the wreckage. They had been living in our walls for a week. Zethkari finished his drink. For 7 days they moved through the ship like ghosts, taking apart critical systems, learning our routines, waiting for the right moment. What was the right moment? When we were close enough to human space for them to steal shuttles and escape. On day 8, they struck. All our shuttle bays opened at once. Emergency systems failed. Half our crew was sucked into space. And the human prisoners? Gone, all of them. Carter had rigged the prison cells to open remotely. They took our shuttles and disappeared into the darkness. "But surely you could have stopped them." Zethkari laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Stop them? Commander, we couldn't even find them." And Martinez left us a parting gift. What gift? He had reprogrammed our food fabricators. For the next 6 months, they would only produce one thing. What? Human military rations. Terrible, tasteless human food, every meal, every day. No matter what we tried, the machines would only make human food. The cantina was completely silent now. "That's when I learned the most important thing about humans," Zethkari said. "They never give up, even when they're captured. Even when they're defeated. Even when they're dying, they keep fighting." Zethkari ordered another drink and waited for it to arrive. The 3 young soldiers sat in silence, their earlier excitement completely gone. The Krelian's green skin had turned pale. The Morvian kept looking around the cantina as if expecting ghosts to appear. The small alien had stopped showing his teeth. "You want to hear another story?" Zethkari asked when his drink came. "I'm not sure," whispered the Krelian. "This one is different. This one is about what war does to humans, what it costs them." Zethkari stared into his glass. "It happened near the end of the war, on a planet called Kepler-7. The old warrior took a long drink before continuing. Kepler-7 was a human colony world. Families lived there, workers, scientists, about 200,000 people total. It was supposed to be safe, far from the fighting. But it wasn't safe. No, my fleet was ordered to attack the planet. We were losing the war by then, and our commanders wanted to hurt human morale. They thought if we attacked civilian targets, the humans would surrender faster." Zethkari's 4 hands clenched into fists. "We were wrong about that too. What happened? When we arrived at Kepler-7, the humans were already evacuating. They had maybe 50 ships trying to get people off the planet. Cargo ships, passenger ships, anything that could fly. They were loading them with families with children." The Morvian shifted uncomfortably. "You attacked civilian ships?" "We had orders. But the evacuation ships were protected by human military vessels. One of them was commanded by a human officer named Colonel Dan Hayes. Just 1 ship against your whole fleet? 3 ships. Hayes had 3 small warships against our battle fleet of 20 vessels. He should have run. Any smart commander would have run and saved his own ships. But he didn't run. He didn't run. Hayes put his 3 ships between us and the evacuation fleet. He sent us a message saying the civilians needed more time to evacuate. He asked us to wait 1 hour. Zethkari laughed bitterly. We thought he was joking. 3 ships against 20. We told him to move aside or we would destroy him. What did he say? He said, "I have children to protect. You'll have to go through me." The cantina had grown so quiet that Zethkari's voice seemed to echo. Other Customers had stopped talking completely, so we fought. Hayes and his 3 ships against our entire fleet. They fought like demons. They used every trick they knew. They fired missiles and turned away at the last second. They used the planet's gravity to slingshot around and attack from behind. 3 ships couldn't win against 20. No, they couldn't. But they held us off for 40 minutes. Long enough for most of the evacuation ships to get away. Hayes saved thousands of lives. But he lost? We destroyed 2 of his ships. The third one, his ship, was badly damaged. We captured Hayes and brought him aboard our flagship. Zethkari took another drink. His hands were shaking slightly. Hayes was wounded, burns on his face and arms, but he was alive. We thought we had captured an important prisoner. A hero of the human military. What was he like? Broken. Completely broken. He just sat in his cell and stared at the wall. He wouldn't talk to us. He wouldn't eat. He just kept mumbling the same words over and over. What words? The children. We couldn't save the children. What we did to save them, the small alien. Frowned. But you said he saved most of the evacuation ships. He did, but not all of them. Some ships were too slow. Some were too damaged. When we got past Hayes and his ships, there were still civilian vessels trying to escape. Zethkari's voice became very quiet. That's when Hayes made his choice. What choice? Kepler-7 had a big fusion power plant. It powered the whole colony. Hayes had 1 ship left, and he was losing the battle. The evacuation ships were going to be destroyed. So what did he do? He rammed his ship into the power plant. The 3 young soldiers stared at Zethkari in shock. The explosion was massive. It created an electromagnetic pulse that shut down every ship in the system, ours and theirs. All. The engines stopped working. All the weapons went dead. Everything just stopped, including the evacuation ships. Including the evacuation ships. They were floating in space with no power, no life support, no way to move. The Morvian's silver eyes were wide. That's horrible. He killed his own people. Some of them, yes. The evacuation ships that were still close to the planet. They couldn't restart their engines in time. They fell back into the atmosphere and burned up. How many? 50,000 people, including Hayes' own daughter. She was on one of the ships that fell. The cantina was completely silent now. Even the background music had stopped. But the ships that were farther away, they had time to restart their systems. They escaped. 150,000 people lived because of what Hayes did. So he saved more people than he killed. Yes, but it broke him. Completely broke him. He had to choose between certain death for everyone, or certain death for some people. He chose to save the many and sacrifice the few. Zethkari finished his drink. Our scientists studied Hayes while he was our prisoner. They wanted to understand how human minds work. They found out that Hayes had been a father before the war. He had lost his wife in an earlier battle. His daughter was all he had left. And he killed her to save strangers? He killed her to save everyone. That's what humans do. They make impossible choices, and then they live with them. What happened to him? He died in our prison, not from his wounds. From guilt, from the weight of what he had done. He just stopped living. Zethkari looked at each of the young soldiers. That's when I understood something important about humans. They don't just fight wars. They carry the weight of every choice they make, every life they save, every life they lose. And somehow they keep fighting anyway. That's not strength, said the Krelian quietly. That's madness. Maybe, but it's also why they won the war. Because they're willing to pay prices that other species won't pay. They're willing to make choices that would break anyone else. Zethkari stood up slowly. Hayes saved 150,000 people, and it destroyed him. But he made the choice anyway. That's what makes humans the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Because they're willing to die. No, because they're willing to live with what they've done. Zefkari sat back down in the booth. The three young soldiers were very quiet now. Their faces had changed during the stories. The excitement was gone. The laughter was gone. Now they looked like soldiers who had heard too much truth around. The cantina, other customers had been listening. Some had moved their chairs closer. Others had left entirely, not wanting to hear more. The air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. "Those are your stories about humans?" asked the Morvian quietly. "Those are the spine-chilling tales?" "Those are some of them," Zefkari said. "I have many more. Stories about humans who fought for days with broken bones. Stories about human medics who walked through enemy fire to save wounded soldiers. Stories about humans who sang songs while they died." The small alien was no longer smiling. "They sound like monsters, do they?" Zefkari asked. "Or do they sound like something else? I don't understand. Think about what I told you. The humans at Titan Base could have blown up the mountain and killed us all, but they didn't. They found another way. They escaped and kept fighting, but they didn't commit murder when they could have." Zefkari gestured to the cantina around them. "The humans on my ship could have killed every Vorthan aboard. They had control of our life support systems. They could have opened all the airlocks and watched us die in space. But they didn't. They just wanted to escape. They wanted to escape. And they wanted to make a point. They showed us that they could reach us anywhere, anytime. That we were never safe from them. But they didn't kill us when they could have." The Krelian frowned. "What about Hayes? He killed 50,000 of his own people to save 150,000 others. He made an impossible choice. But he chose to save as many lives as possible, even if it meant sacrificing some." Zefkari looked at each young face in turn. "Don't you see? These stories aren't about humans being monsters. They're about humans being something much more dangerous." "What? Heroes?" The word hung in the air like smoke. The cantina was so quiet that Zefkari could hear the air recycling systems humming in the walls. "Heroes?" repeated the small alien. "But heroes are supposed to be good. Heroes are supposed to do what's right, even when it's hard. Even when it costs them everything. Even when it breaks them." Zefkari picked up his empty glass and turned it in his hands. "That's what we learned during the war. Humans aren't just fighters. They're not just clever. They're heroes, all of them. Even the ones who do terrible things. I still don't understand why that's scary. Because you can't defeat heroes. You can kill them, but you can't make them stop being heroes. You can capture them, but they'll find a way to keep fighting. You can break their bodies, but their spirits just get stronger." The old warrior looked around the cantina. "We thought we were fighting a war against another species. But we were fighting a war against an idea. Against the idea that some things are worth dying for. Against the idea that some things are worth living for. And you lost? We all lost. Humans lost too. They lost millions of people. They lost whole planets. They lost things that can never be replaced." Zefkari's voice grew soft, but they never lost the idea. The Morvian shifted in his seat. "So the war ended because humans were too stubborn to give up? The war ended because we realized something that terrified our leaders more than any human weapon." "What?" "That if we kept fighting, we would have to become like them." The three young soldiers looked confused. "To be humans, we would have to fight like humans. We would have to make impossible choices. We would have to sacrifice everything. For victory, we would have to become heroes." Zefkari set down his glass. "And our leaders realized that if we became heroes, we wouldn't be Vorthans anymore. We would be something else, something we didn't want to be. So you surrendered? We made peace. There's a difference." The small alien looked around the cantina nervously. But the war is over now. Humans aren't dangerous anymore. Zethkari smiled. For the first time since the stories began. It wasn't a happy smile, but it wasn't sad either. Look behind the bar. The three soldiers turned to look. Behind the bar, cleaning glasses and serving drinks, was a young human woman. She had brown hair and kind eyes. She looked completely normal, completely harmless. Her name is Kate Brooks, Zethkari said quietly. Her mother was General Kate Brooks, the general who ordered the orbital bombardment of my home city. The bombardment that killed 500,000 Vorthans, including my entire family. The young soldiers stared at the human woman with new eyes. Last week, Kate helped me send a message to my surviving relatives on Vorthos Prime. She stayed late. After work to help me translate it into proper Vorthan. She wouldn't let me pay her for her time. Why are you telling us this? Because that's the most terrifying thing about humans. They can wage total war with ruthless efficiency. They can make choices that would break any other species. They can fight until their last breath and never give up. Zethkari stood up from the booth. But they can also forgive. They can show mercy to their enemies. They can work alongside the people who killed their families and act like the war never happened. He put some money on the table for his drinks. That young woman could poison every drink in this cantina. She could kill every Vorthan here and no one would suspect her. She has every reason to hate us, but she doesn't. She doesn't. She serves us drinks and smiles and asks about our families. She treats us like friends. Zethkari looked at each young soldier one more time. That's why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they're killers, but because they're also capable of being saints. He turned to walk away, then stopped. You wanted to know about humans. Now you know. They're not weak. They're not cowardly. They're not lucky. Then what are they? They're everything we're not. And everything we could be if we were brave enough. Zethkari walked toward the exit, leaving the three young soldiers sitting in stunned silence. As he passed the bar, Kate Brooks looked up and smiled. Good night, Zethkari. Same time tomorrow? Yes, Kate. Same time tomorrow. The old warrior walked out into the corridor, leaving behind the cantina and its ghosts. Behind him, the three young soldiers sat in the darkness, finally understanding why the bravest warriors in the galaxy sometimes woke up screaming, because the most dangerous predator in the universe had learned how to forgive.